This particular fire in the Shoshone National Forest, that was Park County, Wyoming, I believe. Yeah, it was kind of halfway between Cody and Wyoming and Yellowstone Park. Was pretty much in a wilderness area. So this was what is known as a fire use fire, which means they were letting the fire burn into the wilderness area to basically accomplish their resource objectives, which were to do what fire naturally does, renew the forest. So our assignment was along the valley bottom where the lodges and summer homes and ranches were, to make sure none of the structures got involved in the fire. But mostly the fire took off to the northeast of us and stayed out of the valley bottoms. Although we did spend a couple of days of doing some backburns with some federal hand crews, taking away the fuel so the fire wouldn't come down to the valley bottoms and involve any of the structures. And then you see your typical command trailer set up somewhere where the incident command is, and they're doing their plans and running logistics. There was a mess trailer for feeding people with a couple of tents. There was a shower trailer, so you could try to stay clean as much as possible. We were out there sleeping in a tent. And they usually have a ground support unit, which is the people who deal with vehicles, maintaining them, assigning them, inspecting them, that kind of stuff. There was a communications trailer there for people doing radios. You know, it was one of your typical project fire type base camps. It takes a lot of people around a base camp, and that's part of what goes along with the Type 2 incident management team, is the people to run the base camp as well as the fire. So do all the support functions for the firefighters out on the fire line. And this fire was interesting because it was kind of very routine, because you usually got up around 5:30 in the morning to have breakfast and be ready for a 6:30 briefing, and at which time they would hand out the incident action plan, which is kind of the script for the day, who's doing what and what the objectives for the day are, and so on and so forth. And in that particular valley, there was almost always an inversion in the morning. All but one of the mornings we were up there was an inversion, which holds the smoke down at the valley bottoms. So you get up and it'd be kind of misty, and the fire itself would be creeping around, and you could actually see the fire from camp. And the fire line actually at one point came right down to the highway that we were kind of posted off of, and got down in around some of the cabins that were there. I think the only structure they actually lost was a doghouse at one of the cabins. And then there was an old abandoned camp up one of the canyons that the Forest Service had taken ownership of, but it was abandoned and kind of run down, and I think that was consumed by the fire as well. But that was basically a routine, and then after we got our briefing, we'd make sure our radios had the right channels in them, because things could change. And then grab our supplies for the day and make sure we had fuel, and head out up to the fire line where we usually met in with our division supervisor, who would give us our fire line assignments. And mostly what we did was stand there and make sure the fire didn't go where they didn't want it to. Because this was not a fire that was being aggressively fought. This was a fire that was being allowed to run up into the wilderness.
The showering varies. Like here, the showers didn't show up till the middle of the fire when we transitioned from a Type 3 to a Type 2. So when we first got there were no showers. And are they coming? California was burning real big, so are they going to come, or did they suck up the resources? There's only so many units of those available. And so, you know, that's why you see a lot of the nice bright yellow Nomex we wear, and wildfire isn't nice and bright yellow because it just gets stained with bar oil and soot, and when you're working, it gets to the point where it won't clean out. You know, you take 2 sets of uniform, everything you take for the entire deployment has to fit into a bag. You know, your alarm clock to your socks, you know, everything has to fit in that. And a lot of crews have to fit flight weights in order to fly back on a commercial aircraft, because one crew will go out, you'll stay on the fire long enough that another crew will take over your apparatus and you'll fly back commercial airlines. So everything has to fit into that criteria. This fire was not bad. The last fire I went on, my tent flooded, everything I owned got wet, and you still have to get up and work and do your job. It's a totally different environment. Yeah, we go with our crew, in this case, a 3-man crew from here. Chief Farrell is not normally a line person, so that's a different entity than you're working with day to day, which is nice to get involved in. I like it. I had to take the last several years off. I just had twin little girls that are now 3 years old and couldn't leave the wife behind with just those. So for me, I'm getting back into something I used to do. Structure fire, you typically have a house. You can have any configuration that's got a yard, and those things are pretty much the same anywhere you go. Here, you could have a cliff on one side, high alpine terrain in another, no water on this fire available where the other one had lots of water. It's just so changing with the demographics and how long it takes you to get in from where your base camp is to where the fire is. There's been some fires I've been at that's 3 hours apart. Just because there's nothing out there that they wouldn't risk putting a camp out there. So that's 6 hours of commuting time a day. You can only learn so much in the classroom. Again, like what I just described with all the varying conditions and everything else, in seeing what it's actually going to do, see it runs a canyon you didn't expect it to run, or why'd it go up this one instead of that one. You can only get that experience out there doing it. And we haven't had a history of that happening a lot here. Yeah. So for our staff to get that experience, they have to go to where the event is. Yeah. If we had a big event here, there would be federal crews coming in, but it's our job to know our home terrain and then help the bigger whole do the job.